Welcome to the Intuitive You podcast, where we explore the concept of intuition from multiple perspectives, learn how intuition manifests itself, and the various ways it is naturally utilized in our world and daily living. I'm your host, Chantal Denise Gosselin, a scientist, a lifelong seeker of knowledge, an intuition teacher, and a passionate educator. Get ready as we dive into the mysteries of intuition and discover how it can enhance our lives and change our world. Hello, welcome to the Intuitive You podcast. Thank you for tuning in. I'm your host, Chantal Denise Gosselin, and today I will share with you a part of my story, a part of my journey of how I became an intuition teacher and coach and how this podcast came to be. And also how intuition came very strongly at specific turning point into my life where I had to make a decision. So the title is Intuition, Suitcases, and a Cat. And you'll understand why the suitcases and the cat more towards the end of the story, which is what led me to move to teach internationally. But before we get there, let's start at the beginning. So the first time I encountered intuition was when I had to make a decision in terms of my career orientation or profession. That question of what do you want to be when you grow up? What do you want to do? And so I was at a crossroad, almost done my master's program, and I had to make a decision of what was the next step. And just to put you into perspective, when I entered university, I knew I wanted to be a biology teacher. I started university knowing or wanting to become a biology teacher. I got a little sidetracked for the better. The master's was a great thing. It was no regrets. But I was at a crossroad where I was divided between logic and heart. I was being told on one end to pursue a PhD or to continue in a certain direction, but my body, my heart was telling me to continue into education. And that sensation, that intuitive hit really came clear when I will always remember I was teaching a third or second year undergrad lab as a TA. And after I was done teaching, I had this butterfly sensation, heart opening sensation, full body sensation of yes, gut feeling, yes, this is what you want to do. This brings me energy. I was energized and really drawn towards. And it brought me back to my original idea of wanting to be a teacher. And I share that story as well with a professor who asked me, so you're coming close to your master's. What do you want to do after? And I did share that story with her, and she smiled. She knew, she knew with her wisdom what was going on inside. And she actually recommended a book, which I still have, called So Let Your Life Speak by Robert Palmer, which is similar story of a man journeying and through synchronicities, his intuition, and just following his path. And so I decided to enroll into Teachers College, became a teacher. And so the first time was a very clear body sensation, as I mentioned, which you will learn later on in the next episode, is referred to as clairsentient. So our body has different ways to receive information, and one of them is through sensations like the gut feeling. So that was number one. The second hit that I got, the clear intuitive hit, was when it was time for me to start a yoga club at the school and bring meditation into my classroom. So at the time, I had been a biology teacher for a couple years. I was IB biology teacher, so International Baccalaureate, which is a beautiful program, well-rounded, very complementary, very multidisciplinary, and challenges the students and the teachers as well. And why I say that is because it also attracted a certain type of student, which takes one to know one, very high achieving, high performance students. And sometimes with the overwhelmness of all the tasks and projects, a lot of students would go into anxiety, panic, like breakdown moments. And I was seeing that a lot more in those classes than my phys ed class, because I was also teaching gym. And I remember it really stuck with me when I saw this student, she was pale as a ghost, sitting in the hallway. I was walking during my prep, and I approached her, and she just had an anxiety attack. And so we had to roll her out in a wheelchair out of the school. And I was like, my gosh, this is not normal. Something needs to be done here. And it just stayed like that. And one weekend I went to a yoga retreat, a weekend retreat, and we did this beautiful meditation. It was a repetitive mantra, Ekangar, for those of you who know this mantra, for 30 minutes straight. And during that time, a clear message came to me in the form of claircognizant. So claircognizance is when something comes through your almost like your intellect. And sometimes it can be hard to discern if it's your logical mind or your intuition, but that's something I coach my clients through. And so that clear message that came through was telling me, bring yoga, bring meditation into your classroom. And so I did. Of course, it came with challenges. So the one thing I like to emphasize on when it comes to following your gut, your intuition, your inner guidance is that you're not going to be walking on this path of butterflies and rainbows. There will be challenges along the way. And some might say, hey, this is life testing you to see how bad you want it, or whatever it will be. But it's important to remind ourselves that following your intuition does not mean the path of least resistance. Actually, it might be the opposite. Just for the first moment where I had to choose and go into teaching, the logical people around me were saying, no, you can't just become a teacher. Almost like that would be like a waste, like keep going to the PhD and so on. And at this moment, the resistance came from finding the fundings, finding the space, which the space went quite well. And I had great support from peers and colleagues. And then the students, the first year, really good. Second year, a little harder. I could have given up that second year. I remember once there was only one student that showed up, but I kept showing up for that student, knowing that everything was perfect just the way it was. And that student needed those tools and that guidance at the time. And so feedback that I got from this was beautiful. I also incorporated some breathing technique, and some students told me that it even helped them in their sport performance and their soccer performance. And I had a student tell me that it helped her not vomit, physically being sick before an exam or a test. And so I saw the benefits, and so much gratitude for being able to share that with those students. And so that was the second time that I can say that I clearly got an intuitive hit. And so for the third part of this story is when I made the decision to leave Canada and go teach abroad. Now, just to put things into perspective, before I signed the contract to go and teach internationally, there was no pandemic. And then the pandemic hit. And as everyone who's listening, we all went through this pandemic in different ways. But one thing that we could all say that we shared was that unknown factor, not knowing what it was, what was happening, what would be the next policy, rule, is this country open, close, and so on. And therefore the school, unprecedented times, as they said, gave us the opportunity to back away, even though we had signed a contract. And for me, it was very clear that despite the fear of the unknown, despite the fact that I was, leaving all security behind, I had been teaching for over 8 to 9 years, selling my car, letting go of all my belongings, or most of them, packing a couple suitcases and a cat, and embarking on this journey and leaving family, friends, and a relationship as well behind. I decided to go anyway. I stayed true to my heart and followed true. And even if I would have decided not to go, it would have not been a bad thing. But that's what my body, that's what my intuition was telling me at the time, is to go regardless, just go. And I did. And it was extremely challenging. I was isolated a lot for the couple months. And I recently read in an article, I can't remember the details, that isolation is as detrimental as smoking. My body reacted a lot to the stress and the solitude and what I was experiencing there. I was by myself in a new country, new language, new culture, new school, new job, new community with my cat and a couple of my belongings. Friends and family couldn't visit me. I'm from Canada. We had very strict regulations. And so I found myself in a situation where, although I was going through this period of isolation and hardship, I had amazing people that I met along the way. And some of those people led me to revisit Mother Ayahuasca for a third time. And it was during that moment, that's the third intuitive hit, big hit that I will share with you. During one of the ceremonies, I had a profound experience of my heart opening and a clear guidance to go back. And I had been in Colombia for 3 months, and that voice, that clear message was telling me to go back. And so after the ceremony, I was like, wow, I just moved here. What does this mean? I'm no quitter. I embarked on this journey for 2 years. And so again, the logic mind started to rise up. But that sensation that I got, so it was at the time a clear sensation, sentient, and also cognizant of go back. And the feeling that I got was just this pure love, just pure love and bliss. And I can honestly say I've never experienced such a sensation again in my life. And so I had to trust that. It was like a direct message from God, from the universe, telling me to listen to my heart. It was my brain shutting down and my heart opening and telling me to go back. And I ended up finishing the school year. I honored my first year contract and moved back. And the move was not easy either, with everything that was happening with the pandemic and the regulations and so on. And when I moved back, I had certain expectations. And this is the fourth part of the story, where following your intuition, following your heart, doesn't lead you to butterflies and rainbows necessarily, in my case anyway. And when I came back, as I mentioned, my expectations were not met. Certain circumstances had evolved and changed, and I found myself with the carpet pulled under my rug. And so I was back in Canada with no job, no car, no, not even a cell phone number when I first came back, but a couple suitcases and a cat. And I found refuge in west of Canada. I needed a home. I needed a place to stay, just to get back on my 2 feet so I could, readjust and make sense of everything that just happened to me, as I thought I was going to come back and things would go a certain way, which did not. I needed time to land. I needed space. And I didn't want to make any decision based on anger or fear. I didn't want to be reactive. So I took some time, the space to come to BC. And I was just supposed to be here for 2 months. And it was the best thing that ever happened to me. And although I was going through, I would say, the hardest period of my life in terms of transition and changes, everything happening all at once, relationship, work, new environment, moving and everything. Death also recently, my uncle had passed. I was supported. I was divinely guided and supported. Certain people came into my life, synchronicities happened beautifully. And I landed here not knowing where I would work, but I had a sense that things would be okay, that things would fall into place. And sure enough, a synchronicity, I met this woman on the plane, which led to one thing and another. And I found myself renovating a house for 2 months and a half when I first landed here. And that was what I needed to, at the time, to really give myself the space. I was not in a state to step back into teaching right away. But when it was time, when everything was divinely timed, when the renovations ended, I heard back from the school in BC. And now they needed me as a sub. And so I started working at that school. And I did a 1 semester contract with them, and I was very fearful at first teaching middle school, which was completely new to me, was used to, the high school, they know what they're doing, back to having class routines and a little bit more management of like, can I go to the bathroom and those little things. But that was the best thing that ever happened to me. I can say that at that moment in time, I was struggling, and those kids gave me a sense of purpose and direction and something to hold on to keep afloat. So while all of this was happening, I was also in parallel asked to do a workshop on intuition in a school, which I gladly accepted. And I started to do the research and prepare my presentation, which led me to discover the beautiful science behind intuition from Heart Math Institute and gut research and so on. And one breadcrumb led to the next, and I found at Mana Academy, which is where I got my intuitive coaching certification. And at first, I was not drawn towards the coaching part of it, but very much so towards the intuition. And I've learned what intuition is, what it is not, that I am intuitive and always been, and what it is and how it manifests itself. And so the moral of the story is that following your heart does not necessarily mean that things will get easy, and to trust the process along the way, and most importantly, to never give up. I can say honestly, there were many, many moments where I wanted to give up. I doubted myself. I was re-questioning all my decisions. When I decided to move to BC permanently and I received all my stuff of January 2022, I got that doubt, that second guessing myself, which crippled me. And so when you fall into that spiral of second guessing and doubting when things start to go wrong, it's important to remind yourself of why you did it in the first place, and not to constantly be questioning or over analyzing, because when we're doing that, we're not in our intuitive mind, and just staying true to my heart, to myself, and knowing that things would be okay. I found the strength in myself and also in a higher power. And for me, it manifests in terms of God. It can be the universe, source, creator, whichever resonates to you. And I, like Caroline Myss said it best, if you don't believe in God, at least believe in yourself. And I can definitely say that this journey led me to believe in myself and rely on myself like I never did in the past. It was a test of faith and trust, and of consistency, of staying consistent with one's decision. And so all of this led me to become an intuition teacher and coach. I'm currently offering workshops and serving as a yoga teacher as well, and doing this podcast, which the goal, as I mentioned in the intro, if you've watched it, is to bring awareness, intuition awareness to the world through storytelling, through my story, other people's story journeys, and also by hearing expert talk about intuition or dreams or their fields of experience to bring forth light on intuition. And so if this resonated, please comment, share, like, and subscribe to stay tuned with the next coming up episodes, which is where you will learn about intuition. Thank you for listening, and I will see you next time.